This film was shot at the recycling plants at Rome of the company Sorine Cecchini S.p.A. Rejected, reformed, reinstated, a story of redemption. By order of the most illustrious and reverend Monsignor Superintendent of the Roads, the throwing or transporting of filth into this alleyway or the rendering of it a foul midden is prohibited on penalty of a fine of 10 scudi and of corporal punishment as shall be judged as befits each offence, etc., etc., etc. This was put up in Rome in 1763, more than 200 years ago. To dispose of the city's refuse, to get it out of the way, get rid of it, was already a serious problem. To get rid of it. But how and where? The age-old solution is still the most common practice today. Dump it somewhere, a long way off, away from the built-up area, in some abandoned quarry. Tip it down into these canyons of dead things. When did these desolate offshoots of a throwaway world first come into being? These mounds of garbage, these squalid horizons of what we discard, the superfluous, trash, our leavings, our dross, our dreck, or as the Reverend Monsignor of the Roads put it, our filth. In every corner of this planet Earth, there exist the offshoots of another planet, the planet Death. Fire. Burn it all up, reduce it to smoke and ashes. This too is a solution adopted in many parts of Italy and the world. It certainly seems the most satisfactory, but it is not. To destroy everything, send it up in smoke, is not good enough. It's too simple. Here we are in Rome again. The amount of refuse a modern city produces is enormous. Every citizen throws away between 700 grams to 2 kilos of rubbish every day. Multiply this figure by 2, 3, 4 million. And all those who are involved in the elimination of refuse have made the same discovery, that a nation's garbage can be a veritable mine of basic materials to be exploited at will, and particularly in times of crisis. The recovery, reuse, and recycling of city waste might seem like something out of science fiction, but it is a concrete reality, a fact of which we may well be ignorant. This film intends to show how the residue of our consumer society, urban refuse, can be rejected, reformed, reinstated. Let's begin with a little game of charades. Look carefully at everything that passes through this girl's hands one fine spring morning in Rome.
Spring, time in Rome, feel the sun in your hair, feather birds in a square, see the girls walking by you, and I say, child, how are you? Stop a while, here with me, have a drink. What's your name? I'm alone in your town, and traffic goes by. All around they gotta see you. You weave your way uptown to the Spanish steps to see. Before you run, lying there at midday, flowers all around, that is over the square. Just the breeze carries me far away, and volare presi meglio, hear that song all these years, still the same. Yes, I'm back around in a town that I love. And traffic goes by, all around they call it see you. You live your way uptown to the Spanish steps to see.
What are you supposed to guess? Well, everything that she has handled has something to do with refuse. So let's see where that leads. Rejected. Let us look at the problem of urban waste in Rome, a European city with 3.5 million inhabitants, where over a period of years an avant-garde solution has been experimented and developed. Every day, fleets of typical silver-grey garbage trucks converge upon various large collection areas on the outskirts of the city, bearing the useless leavings of our daily existence. Now they are crowding at the entrance of another kind of city, the city of environmental industries. These are industries dedicated to saving the environment and conserving our natural resources, and the raw materials they use are urban refuse. Trash. Unwanted. Rejected. Act 1 of the drama. Every day, 1,800 tons of refuse is poured into these vast receiving pits, enough to fill 200 freight cars. It seems like the end of the story. The garbage trucks have done their job and are ready to go home. The garbage lies there lifeless, smothered in dark polythene sacks or crammed into hundreds and thousands of plastic shopping bags. What could look more final? But instead, this is only the beginning of an exciting and frenzied journey. A moment of suspense. The great iron hand opens. With calculated slowness, it descends over the motionless rejects, seduced and abandoned by the city. Captures them. Slowly rises again and swings away. At the end of this brief journey by air, it releases its prey to return for another trip and another. And there lies the poor refuse, seduced and abandoned a second time. These shears are for freeing the rubbish from its large and small plastic wrappings, in which it has been regularly imprisoned, starting some years ago in this part of the world. Sacks and carrier bags are ripped apart, the plastic shredded. The housewife might well consider this an act of sabotage against her valiant efforts to pack the garbage up neatly in polythene. Meanwhile, clouds of steam rise in the air, in contrast to the dust released in the course of the operation. The functional appearance of these enormous buildings is reminiscent of a nuclear power station, but what they house is a series of great machines, fully automatic, which sort the refuse by ingenious means to obtain a first separation of the various elements present in it. A sequence of technical devices and signals allows the different materials jumbled indiscriminately together to recognize each other, detach themselves from the alien, and join up with their like, iron with iron, paper with paper, plastic with plastic, and so forth. Tin cans, boxes, broken bottles, paper, cardboard, wrappings, newspapers, kitchen waste. What a confused and unpredictable wake we leave behind us. Each type of refuse takes a different road. There are powerful electromagnets for ferrous metals, aspirators and cyclones for paper, vibrating racks and other diabolical contrivances. Neglected and despised until a few hours ago, the refuse is now coaxed and courted, wooed and importuned, whirled into a frenzied dance. dance does not end here. Once sorted, the various materials go their separate ways. The important thing is that each element, once detached from its companions, should be recovered, that is, reused in the best possible way. Recycled is the modern word for it, so that it may return to take part in its own right in our daily life. Reformed. This is how paper is reformed. We will follow it through the main processes. The scrap is still caught up in the last whirls of the waltz. At the end, enormous presses descend upon it with a force of 50 tons. And so, crushed into bales, it concludes the second stage of its journey. But this is not the end. The next step is the swimming pool. A dive, and the compressed paper is submersed in great revolving pulpers. Another splash. The water reduces the paper to a creamy pulp, allowing the last foreign elements to sink and settle. Once the pulp is perfectly smooth, it is removed from the tank by vortical suction, and there begins a whole series of laborious operations to refine and purify it and squeeze out surplus moisture. Last squeeze, and there it is on the departure belt, ready to take up its journey once more. Piled up in storage yards, the pulp lies waiting. Periodically, quantities of it are removed by powerful mechanical loaders to be sent to new destinations. Is this our waste paper's last port of call? By no means. Its reformation is not yet complete. Let us move quickly to the paper mill in time to witness the arrival of the truck we have just seen being loaded. Another wetting awaits its contents. Here we are inside the paper mill. Spread thinly and evenly, still full of water, the pulp glides swiftly over a long series of sliding belts. During its progress, the thin, creamy layer will become even finer and will dry out, and then be wound into great bolts. It will be given a permanent wave and become corrugated cardboard for packing. It will be measured, cut and folded and assume the shape of boxes. And here is the first chip in our mosaic. The first answer in our guessing game. As far as paper is concerned, the rejected certainly can be reformed and reinstated. Reinstated. Here the cardboard, obtained from city waste, is used to make large cartons for packing cereals and other materials. Dyed in its Sunday best, it will supply other needs. Sheets of various colors are used for a vast range of stationery articles, things that we encounter every day, in the office, at school, at home. But possibly we never suspected that they were waste paper reinstated in our active society. Or refined pulp can contribute to the making of paper, destined to weave its way daily through the mazes of magazine and newspaper presses. That hectic flood of color and black and white publications pouring from the printing presses to street and station kiosks is the second chip in our mosaic. Some facts and figures. The reusable paper provided by the daily 1,800 tons of recycled refuse mentioned earlier can save us the destruction every year of 400,000 trees, which would otherwise have to be felled to supply us with the equivalent quantity of wood pulp. A shattering figure. 2,500 acres of woodland. 15 parks the size of the Borghese Gardens in Rome. Reformed. These magnets, which we have seen before, permit the separation of ferrous material from the remaining mass of refuse. A little roasting, just enough to melt the tin parts and burn off labels and paint. A hail of roasted cans. A descent into presses which reduce the metal to compact blocks of 150 kilos apiece. Here is a great trench full of iron. It only goes to show that every town possesses or could possess a rich and unexpected iron mine right in its own backyard. A mine which yields not the ore, but the mineral already refined and processed, ready for use. And to extract it, all that is required is the energy in this electromagnetic disc. Just put the metal on the truck, wave goodbye, and off it goes to the foundry. Let us skip over the intervening miles and take a look at the furnaces. Here are bales of iron coming from the bottomless mine of tuna fish and beer cans, bottle tops and oil canisters will be melted down at a reasonable temperature of approximately 1,700 degrees centigrade. This is in preparation for casting. At the moment of fusion, the liquid metal must be of a homogeneous consistency with certain precise characteristics. For this reason, samples are examined periodically. Meanwhile, the new arrived bales of iron travel through the air destined for the blast furnace. This molten metal is ready to be cast. The great moment has come. The principal product of this foundry is building iron, to be formed into the long cylindrical rods used to reinforce concrete. The metal recovered from scrap and refuse is particularly suitable for this. The crucible once more pours out its load of molten iron into the molds, from which great incandescent ingots will emerge. These too have a journey before them, a long, winding journey on the jolting railroad at a comfortable speed. The iron ingot, beaten, compressed, split up, rolled, hammered, bent, etc., will be transformed at the end of its enforced treatment into iron reinforcement for our new concrete buildings. An iceberg of building iron. Every year there is sufficient iron recycled from scrap to permit the construction of 45,000 rooms. So scrap metal can also be reinstated. Rejected. Let's go back to the beginning again. Now we know the game. In our refuse and the possibility of its functional and intelligent recycling lies the solution to a monumental problem, the conservation of natural resources, and as a consequence, the saving of our environment. Reformed. Now we've come to plastic, the irredeemable substance par excellence. In 2,000 years' time, a modern-day seer has predicted only two things will shine on our planet, the sun and plastic. Yet here, even the notorious unregenerate plastic runs a nasty risk. It slides along conveyor belts, plunges into the abyss of a press, glides on again, plunges again. The trap is closing. Clearly, the long conversion process of plastic doesn't end here. Ground up, reduced to grains, recycled plastic can be utilized for a vast number of purposes. For example, for making molded articles such as crates and containers for fruit and vegetables, baskets for wine flasks and demijohns, and 1,000 other things. These are only some of the many uses to which plastic recycled from city refuse can be put. But the possibilities of its application are manifold and vastly interesting, particularly today, when oil derivatives have suddenly become so precious. These huge silos contain granulated plastic. It is this industry which produces the very plastic sacks in which our daily waste is collected. The long cylinder of plastic emerges at high speed from a powerful battery of extruders. Plastic which will then be coiled on bobbins to be cut and welded, rolled and made up into packets and bags ready for use. Who knows if one day in the not-too-distant future these silos will not also be filled in part with recycled plastic? Is it only wishful thinking? No, it is already on the books, an attainable objective. Rejected. Here we are again. While paper, iron and plastic were just beginning their journey, the separation was also taking place of all the organic elements in the rubbish. Food scraps, fruit and vegetable parings, etc. But organic garbage also undergoes a second sorting. The more precious parts, table leavings and such, are put into the first division. The rest is relegated to second. In these large buildings, the most advanced technology is being exploited. Here, for the first division waste, begins a whole cycle of refined, sophisticated treatment. First of all comes washing, a sharp and effective shower bath. The first division organic waste emerges from its ablutions only to fall, figuratively speaking, out of the frying pan into the fire. For now, it is time for it to be sterilized. In these enormous autoclaves, the organic refuse is subjected to a kind of super cooking. Total sterilization at over 120 degrees centigrade and at a pressure of 3 atmospheres. When it comes out, it will be more sterile, more hygienically safe than the food which arrives on our tables every day. The cloud of white steam is the signal that this purging is over. A conveyor belt will take the germ-free organic matter towards the next process, the most difficult and complicated one. The transformation continues. These are dryers, large machines through which blasts of hot air constantly blow and through which the washed and sterilized food waste now passes, urged on by a series of paddles. And here it is initiated into the final mysteries of this last processing room, a veritable labyrinth for the creation of animal feed. In a web of grills and metal boxes, a series of special machines assumes the task of separating, sifting, mashing, and selecting, all completely automated. The mechanic is merely required to make an occasional check and almost risks appearing an intruder. The machines do not appreciate interference. They do everything themselves, quivering with self-importance. At the end of a long and arduous trial by ordeal, only a fine, edible flour will be allowed to emerge, a flour of high nutritive value. All clear ahead for the flour. And here we are in another department. In this machine, the flour will be formed into pellets of animal feed. Thus, the first division refuse is admitted to the World Championship as a refined, highly nutritious foodstuff which will keep for years. The shower of feed is ready to be distributed. That is to return and be reinstated in our world. Reinstated. All there is to do is to store the feed, pack it into large sacks, seal them, and so on. After all this, there is still one more journey to be undertaken. Restless, impatient, these animals await their food, and they do not wait in vain. Pellets of feed are poured into their troughs in this big factory farm. Choice mouthfuls to be gobbled down and contribute to the production of our succulent chops and steaks. A fascinating statistic. Every year, 2,000 tons of meat can be obtained thanks to the feed extracted from garbage. Feed whose gestation and birth we have just watched. This is the prehistory of our Sunday roast today. Another chip fits into the mosaic. Let us change horizons. This time, the waiting procession is made up of dairy cattle. Now they are eating fresh hay served in the home. But later, at the most important stage of milking, when the cows take their places one after the other in the great merry-go-round where they leave their milk twice a day, our recycled organic feed will be poured down through their troughs. A special reward, a choice tidbit in gratitude for their enforced gift to us. On the dairy counter, another segment fits into place in our mosaic of the rejected, reformed, and reinstated. And what about the second division refuse? It has not been forgotten. It is being homogenized, matured, in brief transformed in these enormous metal drums. When it sees the light again, it will be as the basis for an organic agricultural conditioner known technically as compost, which must complete its evolution on these extensive maturing floors. From here, it will be taken to enrich the soil for a variety of crops. But even second division products have a hope of being promoted. This plant, by means of further processing, ennobles the compost extracted from waste, making a dry organic matter which can be stored in bags and put to other more refined uses. Now it has the appearance of brown cylindrical crumbs. But what are these more refined uses? Well, this, for example. We are in a hothouse to watch a gala performance by our converted compost. Title, How to Produce a Plant. The first act is already in progress. A bed is being prepared. The product is spread out evenly in a layer about 1 inch thick. Act 2. It is watered generously, soaked. Act 3. a sprinkling of earth just enough to cover the first layer. Act 4, more watering. Then a few days interval to enable the pellets under this thin covering of earth to develop a temperature of about 40 degrees centigrade. Now comes the grand finale. The bed is ready. Nothing remains but to transplant the seedlings and wait with confidence. And here are the results in glorious technicolor. Second division refuse has been used to feed the stuff of our dreams, to give color and beauty to our lives. Rejected, reformed, reinstated. And for those whose sensibilities are rather more gastronomic than aesthetic, there are other greenhouses for vegetables, our own tropical forests, where tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, etc. can be gathered. In the realms of floriculture and market gardening, we conclude another fascinating chapter of our story, rejected, reformed, reinstated. For those indifferent to greenstuffs, salad haters, for the champions of energy without intermediaries, there is still another way in which this dried organic matter can be used. As a fuel, it has a heating power of no less than 3,000 calories per kilo. It is as easily stored, transported, and fed into industrial burners as any other fuel. And there are more chapters which have yet to be written. About glass, for instance. A method of isolating, straining, and reusing it already exists. Here it is transformed into a shower of gems. False, of course. But false only to a certain extent. For who can deny the value of this experimental plant for the recovery and segregation of vitreous matter? The product obtained is commercially valid, with only minimal traces of adulteration by other substances. And tomorrow, as market demands increase, it may well serve to provide us once more with bottles, jars, etc. Yet another chip takes its place in the mosaic. But even for the most unlikely refuse, garbage so disintegrated and dirty as to appear irredeemable, there is still a place in the scheme of things. Through fire. Yes, some waste goes to the incinerators, for thus it provides steam for all the work processes we have been observing. Autoclaves, dryers and dehydrators, purifying plant, etc. Every cloud of steam we have seen, or whose existence we have suspected, is the undeniable proof that even the apparently unrecoverable can be saved and reinstated in our world. The environment is safe. Nothing that is less than useful has been put back into it. Only two tenacious enemies remain to be overcome: tainted water and fumes, the only two substances capable of harming or polluting the environment. This the environmental industries cannot permit, and the remedy exists. The purpose of this plant is to solve the water problem correctly. Sludge contained in the liquid is deposited through a series of purifying tanks. Then it is centrifuged and recycled in compost. Freed of its burden of filth, the water is pumped back and reused in all the various processes. As for fumes, there is a purifying process through water which solves the problem brilliantly. This spotless white puff of smoke is proof of its efficacy. The express coach of the environment can start off again. Our story is finished. To conceive and put into practice a revolution such as this, many elements were needed. Industrial enterprise and imagination, technical know-how, the skill and dedication of many trades, unshakable determination. This story started 15 years ago in Rome, and we wanted to tell it not just to specialists in the field, but to the political, social, economical, and cultural powers that be, to schools and to citizens, because it can teach us all something. There is a moral, too, this, that through the programmed recycling of urban refuse, we can safeguard and reevaluate a whole series of precious natural resources, create employment, and in addition, make a notable reduction in the cost of refuse elimination, particularly if compared to incineration, expenditure which every town and city must face every year. And apart from the moral, there is also a prospect for the future. With the serious collaboration of local authorities and industry, of producers and consumers, the cost of refuse elimination could itself be eliminated. Environmental hygiene is imperative, and the price must be paid. But it could be more than recuperated if these half-processed materials turned out by environmental industries were fully appreciated and exploited. Our express coach of the environment goes swiftly towards a better future. It is a symbol that reminds us that our refuse can provide us with great wealth, but only on one condition: that applying a harmonic and comprehensive design involving all the elements related, the refuse rejected is reformed and reinstated.